Hey everyone, welcome to Spartan V for all your hair system needs. And today we are talking about poly versus lace. So these are two very different bases, and I'm going to be going through sort of the pros and cons of these bases, what's usually best for someone who's first starting out to use a hair system, and also what's best for the weather conditions, exercising, etc, etc. As usual, if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Okay, so let's crack on to the bases. So first of all, we have a poly base. So just to show you, this is a poly base. As standard, most of these are going to be V-looped, so it just means you get sort of like a V that goes down into the base of the hair system. They're generally quite durable unless you go for an extremely thin base, which is the super thin skin. And this one I'm showing you here, this is about a 0.6 mil. So even though you can see it like that, and let me just show you from this side, this still can be quite undetectable. So this is something that I first started off with, and I found it really easy to maintain. So because you can easily do the front lift, clean it off, stick, put it back down. That's what like the poly systems look like. You can use tape and glue on these, or just tape or just glue. I've done all combinations. I found the best of these is using tape around the perimeter and then doing glue at the front. It just works out a lot better because it means you've got that strong tape at the back, it's not going to move for quite a while, and then you can easily do the maintenance on the front. It being glue, you're not really going to have that shine that comes through like some tape does, and it's a lot easier to maintain with glue at the front. Even though tape is easy when you're doing a full fit, if you're just doing front lifts and sorting them out, then glue on this is a lot easier. So let's move on to lace. So this is lace. It's a bit like tights, and it's usually quite durable as well. This particular one does have bleached knots at the front, as you can just see there. Apologies, it's a bit messy, still need to give it a bit more of a clean. So lace, you get different types of lace. So you get Swiss lace and French lace. As a preferred lace type is Swiss lace, because it can be a lot finer and a lot more undetectable. With lace, my personal preference on when I'm putting lace on is all tape. So I'd use tape around the back, a real sticky hard tape, and then I'd use a dull tape at the front so there's no shine, no matter whether you have it fully back or like how I have it, just swept a bit to the side. Two very different bases there. Let's go through some of the pros and cons. So pros for poly base. Right, I would say the biggest pro on this one is cleaning. It is really easy to clean compared to lace. So because of the type of base it is, if I had glue or tape, I'd peel the tape off, I'd put a bit of C22 solvent remover on it, let it, dissolve the glue for about 10-15 minutes. I'd wipe that off, and then I'd use some cotton wool to get all the glue that remains on there. But that is pretty simple to do on a poly base, basically. The second pro is that, especially if you get a super thin skin, it is extremely undetectable. If you get it done right, then you cannot see any of these edges here, because at the moment you look at it like that and you don't think, how can you hide that? But when it's against your head, it stretches out and goes on the skin. It is pretty much undetectable. There are two big things that are really good with this. The cons for me is summer, it's nowhere near as breathable. I prefer to go with a lace and maybe a part poly for summer, and then for winter I maybe go to this, but then I might stick with what I like, which is the lace and poly mix, which is a good combination and makes it a bit easier to sort of look after and have that sort of natural look how I do mine. So that is a problem, breathability on these. You know, you can just do the perimeter, so that bit in the middle would just slightly sit up, but no, I did find it doesn't have as much breathability in it, so that means you won't get as long holding on the glue because you'll sweat underneath, it'll go into the glue, and that will mean you'll get less of a hold. But that, you know, it really does depend on, you know, your skin type. Some people have really oily skin and sweaty skin, but I have quite sweaty skin. I sweat quite easily, so which is what happened to me. I know people who use this all the time and have no problem at all because they barely sweat, so you know, it can be absolutely fine. But yeah, you know, that is another problem. The second thing is, if you're going for a realistic look on a super thin skin, these are only going to last you around 4 to 6 weeks, they advertise. You can make it last longer, you know, I think you could get about 3 months out of it, but you know, you're going to get a bit of shedding because, you know, with super thin skin, it will use the most realistic loop into the system it can, and you know, it's not going to be extra dense, so it's not going to last as long as say a lace would. So you know, they're just a couple of bits to go through on the poly, but you know, still a brilliant system. Next, with the lace system, pros first of all, durability. A lot of the lace systems can last a long time. You know, I find that they seem to be pretty strong and they barely shed. You know, the poly systems do as well. If you get a thicker base on a poly system, it won't shed so much. But again, realistically, if you want a realistic look on a poly versus a lace, then you're probably gonna get the poly base is gonna look more realistic, but there's not gonna be too much difference, but a lace will last a lot longer when it comes to it. Number 2 pro, weather. You can sweat through this because you've got the venting in the base. It will allow you to sweat your heart out and not be as damaging to the glue as a poly base would. So, you know, which is really quite a big thing I'm finding in the hair system industry, because a lot of people exercise, they want something that's going to really stay on their head, and you know, this gives you the maximum sort of durability and breathing, as I can say, in a hair system you can get, which is really good. On the con side, I would say depending on the knot, so you can get certain ones with single knots and get other ones with double knots. I wouldn't advise a double knot system purely because of how they can look. So let me just show you this one, and I'm not sure if you can see the knots fully on there. I'm trying to get the angle, but these come up quite big on the knots. So if it is a lighter system where, you know, there's not a massive amount of density, you will see those knots on your head. I have actually tried bleaching the knots on this, and double knots are so hard to bleach. Some of it has worked and some of those knots can look really good, but then other part of the knots are still quite big. So, you know, that is a con. You know, you will have knots on your head. If it is a, you know, a very light density system, then I would say go for more of a poly, because yeah, you probably will see some of these knots. But again, you know, if you have a standard sort of density, a bit like I have, you will not see any knots at all, and it will be absolutely fine. So it's like a single knot system. So the single knots are tiny, absolutely tiny. So again, you can hardly see them, especially if you buy a hair system with bleach knots. So it's a bit like how I showed at the front here. So it's where they bleached it to make it look more realistic at the front. Then, you know, it's going to be pretty good. So I personally, on some of these bleach ones, I would do it a bit better. I'm going to be doing a whole bleaching sort of course on some of these. So the single knots you can bleach a lot easier, the double knots are a lot harder. So looking at particular ways of getting the best way to bleach. So if I was to bleach like this hair system, for instance, I would probably bleach it all over, purely because it's quite a light density on this system. Show you again, you know, you can see through it, so you know you'd want all the knots to be invisible. You know, that is the downside of it. Another downside, sometimes these just don't work for people's heads. I did have one person before, Justin, who had the lace system. The tape didn't work for his head. I don't like gluing on a lace system with just the spread on glue rather than the tape, purely because I find it gets too sticky and too much of a nightmare to clean. So you know, that is another problem when it comes to these. When it comes to being a beginner, I would always recommend going for a poly system. That is going to be the easiest to maintain, the easiest thing to clean up, and if you ever need to do it yourself again, it's easier to put on. If you are someone who exercises quite heavily and you're not too oily on the scalp, then I would definitely recommend a lace system. You're going to get a lot less itching when it comes to it. It's another thing I forgot. So another con of the poly I found, you get a lot of itching. With a lace, I find I don't get hardly any itching on the base. So, sorry, just going back to that point again. So yeah, lace, I would say if you exercise pretty heavy, lace is going to be a really good option for you. If you're starting out, then just go for the poly. It'll be a lot better. To come to the point where we say what is the best overall, this really is dependent on the person and your lifestyle. If you're someone who just wants to have hair that looks awesome, you know, you're not going to exercise too heavy, you just want something you can, you know, do lots of different styles with, poly's going to be your choice. That's going to be, you know, probably your number one system to go for. If it's someone who has an active lifestyle and is constantly on the move, wants something that, you know, is going to feel a bit more breathable in the head, it's going to be the lace. So to me, there's not really an overall winner. I've got a mixture of the two, lace around this part on the front, and then poly around the sides and back, because then I'm getting best of both worlds. But I do get some funny lifts sometimes, and with the tape, if I get too sweaty over time, it starts looking a bit funny. I need to change this today, so the front is looking a bit horrendous at the moment, so apologies for that. But yeah, that's my take on poly and lace. If there's anything you'd like to contribute, then please add it to the comments. Anything I've missed out you feel is critical. This is just going by my own personal view and how I found it. And yeah, you know, I hope you found that useful. And as always, lots more content on this way. Thanks for watching.